I'm a fan of Read650 because storytelling has never been more important.
Read650 is such an incredible organization because you know what their mission statement is? To promote writers.
From the start, Read650 has done everything with the best intention of promoting writers and writing. It's been a labor of love, really.
I'll always be grateful to the friend who added my name to the Read650 email list. I had no idea that she was giving me a real gift.
It's not stand-up and it's not therapy. It's legitimate literary work given voice by the writer.
What 650 Forces want to do is to focus on that core, that essence, that piece of the story that gives the story life.
While we're all at home, apart from our friends and family, watching and listening to storytellers is a way to connect.
We write to connect.
So that I could connect to my readers and my listeners.
Their mission statement is to promote writers.
There are so many ways to share our stories these days, and the bravest, most riveting way to do so continues to be through the spoken word.
Doing this during the sequester and recording it for an online audience made me change out of an old t-shirt for a change and put something else on, which was in and of itself uplifting during this time.
From New York's Hudson River Valley, I'm Edward McCann, and this is Read650. Hello and welcome to Read650's very first fully online primetime show on mothers. And a happy Mother's Day to everyone watching right now. I'm glad you're here and I'm proud to be hosting this very special event. Read650 is a 501c3 nonprofit literary arts organization with a mission to promote writers through curated live and digital performances celebrating the spoken word. We feature writers reading their own work aloud for an audience, creating a digital archive of recordings that will have a second life through podcasts and broadcasts. Read650 events aren't open mic shows, and there's nothing random or improvisational about what we do. We place a strong emphasis on the craft of writing, and the pieces we feature are selected by an editorial committee of journalists and writers of essays, novels, memoirs, and plays. Read650 was born on Father's Day 2014 when I produced our very first show at Nancy Manicherian's The Cell on West 23rd Street in New York City. The Cell is a nonprofit with a mission to incubate new work, and I will always be grateful to The Cell for the role it played in our launch. With great help from Richard Kolath and Stephen Lewis and Conrad Troutman, it was at The Cell where I first created the kind of curated, submission-based reading that I wanted to attend. Since then, we've grown and branched out and continue to issue submission calls for intentionally broad topics like mother or holiday that encourage a wide range of expression. We take our name from the maximum word count of the true story submissions we present, 650 words, which translates to a 5-minute spoken word performance. During this stressful and uncertain time, staying safe and remaining healthy is our first priority as we adapt to new routines and to new ways of working and to serving our mission. Working from home, as many of us are, our 5-member editorial team read and rated well over 100 submissions on mothers, rereading dozens of fine entries with the difficult task of selecting both the best work for our new book, which contains over 30 stories, and for the 14 writers that we're going to present during this show. And I should just add here that if we were not experiencing a global pandemic, the show would be taking place at City Winery's spectacular new New York City flagship location on the Hudson, where we would all be lifting our glasses in a toast to City Winery founder and CEO Michael Dorf for his remarkable achievement. Michael, we all look forward to next time. This very special edition of Read650 is our response to the coronavirus pandemic. Rather than be sidelined until we can safely gather again at City Winery or Lincoln Center or a Carnegie Hall Festival event, we have pivoted to use the tools available to us to serve our mission to promote writers. We hope you enjoy it, and we thank you for joining us for a bit of old-fashioned appointment television when you could just as easily be binging on Netflix. It's true that you can never repay your mother, but the writers whose work you're about to hear pay extraordinary tribute to their mothers and to motherhood itself, with true personal stories about the many faces of motherhood and to the lifelong commitment of mothering. We had a remarkable number and a range of submissions on this topic, and all the writers whose work you will hear have risen to the challenge of compressing and distilling their experiences into a tight, taut frame of 650 words, which is no small feat.
It's an exercise for the writer to be able to distill the most important elements of a story down to 650 words.
And I appreciate that level of focus, because I know I tend to go to feel the need to to give a complete, whole, total visual.
When you're challenged to create a piece that's 5 minutes long, 650 words, and you have to extract that from a 5,000 word piece, it makes the piece sing.
It forces me to focus on the part of the story that matters, the part of the story that will resonate with the listener and the reader.
In Act 1 of our show, we'll present Elizabeth Pimentel, Mercy Tullis-Bakari, Zia Archer, Ellen Nenner, Betty MacDonald, Catherine Hiller, and Jennifer Rawlings. So let's get to it. We begin Act 1 with Elizabeth Pimentel, who describes herself as being, in her youth, what her parents warned her against. She left her conservative family in Massachusetts to attend New York University. There, she helped take over the university to protest the Vietnam War. In Washington, D.C., she was jailed for attempting to shut down the government. After college, she joined a commune in Denver and drove a taxi. Here, recorded in her home in the Bronx, is Liz Pimentel with My Grandmother, My Midwife.
"You're having your baby at home?" my mother gasped when I told her my plan for delivering my third child. "You're 43. Are you crazy?" To quiet her, I asked, "Where were you born, and how old was Nana when she had you?" The answer was at home on the farm in Plymouth, Massachusetts, at age 43. In fact, all of my Italian grandmother's 10 children were born at home. My first baby was born in a large urban hospital. I'd wanted the healthiest, warmest, drug-free environment for my child, but he was delivered in a cold, sterile operating room by emergency cesarean section. I swore it would be different next time. 2 years later, hoping to regain control in my second delivery, I switched to a smaller Bronx hospital and found a physician skilled at vaginal births after cesareans, a rarity. But the doctor's technique of squeezing the baby out by pressing on my abdomen every time I pushed left me feeling like a used tube of toothpaste. For my third delivery, I wanted a secure, nurturing environment that would restore my power. I thought about Nana in her farmhouse in the winter of 1918, assisted at my mother's birth by her 15-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, my namesake. I visualized my strong grandmother right after delivery, giving orders from bed for my aunt to strip the sheets and soak them in the icy water of the nearby cranberry bog. It seemed simple back then to have your baby at home. It was way more complicated now. Mine was a geriatric pregnancy, the term for having a baby over age 35, which put me at risk for hypertension, diabetes, and miscarriage. My scarred uterus, a result of the cesarean, raised the possibility of uterine rupture. My older sister said, "Go to a hospital where they can take necessary precautions." Well-meaning friends felt compelled to warn me of the dangers of home birth. Still, I refused to view this pregnancy as pathological. I would take safeguards to protect myself and my child, and I would channel Nana. Born in a village in northern Italy, my grandma, who'd lived until age 94, had no formal education beyond grade school. She crossed the ocean with 3 small children in 1902, joining her husband in Massachusetts. Members of the community of Italian immigrants in North Plymouth came to her for advice. Nana was their midwife and had delivered many babies in their own dwellings. Lacking that sort of approval from my peers, I devised a strategy for success by creating my own village with a support group of women who'd had previous C-sections and wanted vaginal births. Through them, I found a doula to provide support and a certified nurse midwife with nearby physician backup who would help me deliver in my Bronx abode. My husband and I took a course in birthing at home. I emphatically told the naysayers, "My grandmother gave birth in her own house 10 times. I should be able to do it once." Months later, in the throes of labor, I looked across my bedroom to my dresser mirror, where I'd hung Nana's amethyst rosary beads, a cherished keepsake passed down to me. Conjuring up her strength, I gave birth to my healthy 9-pound son. When my eldest child yelled out the window to the neighborhood kids that I'd had the baby, it was like the white smoke heralding the election of a new pope. I can't say I did it alone because my midwife, husband, and doula were all attending to me, while my children, watched by my sister's daughter, played downstairs. I can say I pushed my third baby out under my own efforts without medicinal, physical, or surgical interventions. I did it with the help of family and friends, an old-fashioned support system like my grandmother before me. Sometimes, to move forward, it's helpful to go back to our roots.
Elizabeth received a physical therapy degree from the University of Colorado and an MA in motor learning from Columbia. For the past 30 years, she's taught neuroanatomy to medical students. She's been published in the Washington Post, Salon, the Daily News, and others, and is currently writing a memoir about cab driving. Liz and her husband live in the Bronx, where they raised 3 boys. Mercy Tullis-Bakari is a poet, essayist, and fiction writer whose writing focuses on the female experience through individuality, motherhood, and sexuality. She's a Callaloo Fellow, an MFA recipient in creative writing from the College of New Rochelle, and the Poet Laureate of the New York University 30th Anniversary Celebration Gala. Here she is with When Mommy Put a Gun in My Hand.
While vacationing in Honduras with my mother the summer when I was 11 years old, the country was experiencing an energy crisis. All electricity was shut down by 8 p.m., and the humid heat made us sleep in only our panties since we did not have the electricity to operate a fan at night. No electricity had also enabled the crime rate to sharply increase in the midst of pitch black night. The energy crisis had lasted for several years, and the houses in our colonia were getting broken into and residents attacked, more often than they had ever been. The Honduran authorities did little to nothing to ensure our safety. Adding to the problem, my mother was also a black woman from America who owned property. Coming from a country where roads were supposedly paved in gold and money grew on trees, she knew that if anyone in her colonia was going to be robbed, it was going to be her. In this time of lawlessness and disorder, my brother felt that guns were needed in the house. He kept 2 handguns locked in a chest that was hidden under my mother's queen-size bed. When my mother was in her early 20s, she was a teacher who worked in the unmapped parts of the countryside of Honduras. While walking through the bush to get to a road, several men attempted to attack her. Knowing that she was lucky to have escaped, my mother vowed then that she'd be better prepared the next time men would attempt to assault her. She began to ride a motorcycle, taught herself how to use a gun, and always kept a gun in her work bag. Our second night that summer, when I was 11, she shook me awake to tell me she had heard something. The noise could have been the neighbor's chickens or the breeze from the nearby beach causing the coconut tree branches to hit each other and the roof of our house. Or maybe actual intruders. My mother erred on the side of caution. Both of us, in our panties, her breasts hanging down and jiggling as she gingerly got off the bed and went on her knees to get the small chest from under our bed. She checked both guns to see if they were loaded. After checking each gun, my mother handed the smaller one to me. My hand was shaking because the power I held was overwhelming for my 11-year-old mind and body. I feared accidentally pulling the trigger and shooting my mother. She saw my nervousness, so she grabbed the barrel of the gun and placed it on the windowsill for stability. She whispered with the strength that only a mother who was protecting her child with unwavering urgency would say, "When I tell you to shoot, you shoot." She then turned to the window and yelled into darkness, "We have 2 guns pointing at you. Leave my property now or we will shoot until we know you are dead." We stayed by the window for some time until the sound that only my mother heard stopped. She took the gun from my still shaking hand and put both guns back in the chest. She told me to go back to sleep. But I didn't sleep. My eyes were closed, but my mind was alert with the image of my holding a gun, our chickens picking at dead bodies in our backyard, and thoughts of my mother not surviving an accidental shot. I haven't held a gun since. My mother and I never spoke about that moment, but that dark night, my mother taught me that fear is a creation of the mind. And regardless of the threat, pushing through fear is key to survival.
Mercy was named one of the 8 authors bringing Afro-Latina stories to the forefront by Remezcla magazine and was a Pushcart Prize nominee in 2016 for her essay, Black Dolls for Everyone. Mercy lives in New Rochelle, New York with her 2 children, and you can learn more about her at mercytullisbakari.com. Up next, Zia Archer. Zia is a writer and librarian living in northern New Jersey whose contributions to our special Mother's Day event is an essay entitled The Stork. Let's listen.
It's really just a glorified cervical cap. Insistently unsexy, it's a decided improvement upon the penis, which I suppose tries. It's meant for intravaginal insemination, which sounds like regular insemination because it is. With specimen cup locked in and plunger in place, semen is deposited at the terminus of the cervix and kept corked for up to 6 hours, after which it is neatly pulled out of the vaginal canal like a tampon. Its precision and functionality do take a lot of the spontaneity out of the attempt at conception, not to mention some of the fun. The stork isn't a sex toy. It's all work and no play, and we're in the business of getting pregnant. For a large chunk of whatever time it's normal to begin thinking about these things, I was certain I didn't want to be a parent. My distaste for parenthood was nurtured by my increasing and not wholly unwelcome belief that I would spend my life alone. For me, it was generally understood that to be gay was to be single, maybe partnered, never parent. And then at 21, I fell in love. Being in love can change a lot of things about a person, and for me, it softened me in ways I so desperately needed to be softened. The magic of falling in love cracked open possibility. Yet our desire for parenthood remains a disruption. To some, we're playing God. To others, we're shamelessly conceding defeat to heteronormativity. Honestly, if somebody is asking to spend the foreseeable future elbow deep in feces and vomit, why stop them? We're 2 months away from our first go at it, our first walk around the block while our dear friend ushers his raw genetic material into a cervical cap, our first time loading the plunger, inserting and releasing, our first time squealing with delight at the done deed, while I lay level with her midsection and imagined the cellular activity taking place. Our first time waiting an agonizing 2 weeks, while she feels every cramp and twitch like never before. The first pregnancy test, or first disappointing period. And our first time waiting 2 weeks to try it all again. While a majority of the reviews bubble and exclaim about the stork delivering on the first attempt, I can't help but temper my expectations. I'm putting my faith, my future, in a non-reusable applicator device, a piece of $59.99 plastic, on the shelf at CVS. What will it mean to help somebody conceive? I'm filling a space rarely occupied, a third person in the room in which sperm and ovum meet. I will be the vessel through which the seed of life bursts open. I will carry the specimen cup with holy reverence up the stairs and prostrate before the life-giving altar a supine woman on a bed. I will gently guide the applicator through a reverse trip into the birth canal, and I will plunge the petals open and deliver to the mighty cervix an offering, tens of millions of offerings. I will say a blessing as my journey commences and my work as interlocutor concludes. Godspeed, boys. This is the origin story of so many lives, and yet so few, and still entirely its own. Who am I to the life begun here? A middleman, technically unnecessary, just a big kid playing God with sperm and egg, dare I say a parent? As the great work begins, in a uterine tube, in the body of a woman I love, maybe while sleeping or running or on an airplane, I will be ready for the labor. Used to plunging, feet first, cap erect and with abandon, I will dive into this new life. If I was good enough to be God for a moment, I'll be good enough for whatever's next.
Zia's poems, plays, and reviews have been read and performed in queer spaces including Skin to Skin, Your Name Here, and The Lesbrary. Her nonfiction work on queer motherhood appears in Hot Metal Bridge, Santa Fe Writers Project Quarterly, and Newspaper. Zia and her wife welcomed their daughter this past February. Ellen Nenner was a student at the High School of Music and Art, a piano student at the Juilliard School of Music, an economics philosophy major at Mount Holyoke College, and received an MA in urban planning from the New School for Social Research. Ellen has appeared on our stages before and today shares her work from her home in Jamaica, Queens. Here's Ellen Nenner with So Does She.
I'm about 10 when my mother decides I should go to charm school. I'm not sure what they do there, but I don't ask any questions. A few weeks later, she tells me we're going downtown to Charming Debuts on Saturday, so I won't miss school. We take the A train from Dyckman Street to 14th Street. The building is right next to the subway exit, and the sign says, Charming Debuts, 13th floor, room 3. We're shown into the office of the school's director, Miss Eleanor Pitts. She stands as we enter, says hello, and points to the 2 chairs in front of her large mahogany desk. She's skinny, has gray hair, and doesn't seem very friendly. Once my mom and I are seated, Miss Pitts sits, folds her hands on top of the desk, and begins to explain what services the school provides to its charm students. As the conversation goes on, I learn that charm seems to have something to do with crossing your legs at your ankles rather than across your knees. I don't look directly at Miss Pitt's face. Instead, I eye the wall behind her. It's covered with photographs of girls that don't look anything like I do. Some of them are older, and some are about my age. Most of them are really pretty, with long, shiny hair and straight white teeth. My hair's not so great. It's kind of mousy colored. But I'm wearing my new gray wool dress and a pillbox hat on my head that my mother made me wear, so I guess I look all right. I'm kind of scared, though. When I start swinging my legs back and forth under the chair, my mom gives me that stop look, even though the director probably can't see what I'm doing. Mom answers all of Miss Pitt's questions, so luckily I don't have to open my mouth. If I did, she'd see the wires that wrap around each and every tooth. She asks lots of things about me and the family, like what school do I go to? Am I a good student? What does my dad do? Then she asks if I have any particular talents. So my mother tells her that I play the piano and that Mr. Greenberg, my teacher, thinks that I should try out for Juilliard. Would you like to go to Juilliard, Ellen? The director turns toward me and asks. I'm forced to answer. I keep it short. Yes, I say, hardly moving my lips. Miss Pitts looks at me, and after a few minutes, she stands up and tells my mother that she might be able to do more with me if I come back in a few years, without the braces. Outside, my mom and I walk to lunch at a nearby Horn and Hardart, my favorite restaurant. I already know what I'm going to eat because every time I go to an automat, I have the same thing. Cream spinach, Harvard beets, and macaroni and cheese. It's fun to put the coins in and open the little hinged window that holds each dish of food. I've moved my head close to the open glass-door dispenser to get a glimpse of the person in the back who fills it up whenever it's empty. My mother doesn't say much on the subway ride home. I get the feeling she's disappointed at the way things turned out. I'm sure she took me to charm school because she thinks it's a good thing to do. I want you to marry a prince, she always tells me. Still, I can't help feeling sad that I'm so lacking in what she wants me to be that I need some sort of expert to fix me up. When we get out of the subway and walk toward home, she takes my hand. That means she loves me anyway, right?
Ellen is a former writer and editor at the consulting behemoth McKinsey & Company, and she has attended writing workshops at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, Massachusetts, and she is also a trustee at Master Voices, a not-for-profit performing arts institution that believes that the human voice is the world's most powerful instrument. Ellen, who attends classes and workshops at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College, has discovered a profound connection between telling stories through music and telling stories through the written word. And she's currently at work on a nonfiction book of connected essays and short stories. Up next is writer-performer Betty MacDonald. Betty contributed and performed in TMI's What to Expect When You're Not Expecting at Woodstock's Bearsville Theater. Her essays and poems are included in the anthologies Get Out of My Crotch, 80 Things to Do When You Turn 80, Better with Age, and Open House. She has appeared on our stage before and appears here on our virtual stage from her Ulster County home. Here's Betty MacDonald with The Daughter of Twins.
I am the daughter of twins. Doris gave me life and raised me, and Minerva, her twin sister, adopted me many years after my mother died. When I was 64, Minerva was 91. The twins identified strongly with each other their whole lives, even dressed alike well into their teens. They didn't look alike or sound alike, but they said a lot of the same things. Because Doris was the more mellow of the two, when Minerva spoke, it was like having an actor with a bad attitude read my mother's lines. Doris married first and had a baby, my brother Sam. Then Minerva married and gave birth to David. The score was even, but not for long. When the doctor told Minerva she couldn't have more children, she became resentful, not toward my mother for outbirthing her by having a daughter, but toward me for being that daughter. She never liked me, and the feeling was mutual. A few weeks after my mother died at age 79, Minerva's 53-year-old son died of a stroke. With the loss of the two most important people in her life, my aunt was crushed. I was grieving as well, but concerned that with the death of her son, Minerva had no reach into the future. It was clear that without my help, she would be utterly alone. I set aside my bad feelings and became Minerva's caretaker. For over a decade, I traveled regularly from my home in the Hudson Valley to attend to my aunt in northern New Jersey. 12 years later, out of the blue, Minerva called to tell me she wanted to adopt me. I was to meet her and her Alan, her lawyer, at the courthouse in Hackensack. When I asked why, she said, "It's Alan's idea," as if that was explanation enough. In yet another attempt to please my cantankerous aunt, and with my lawyer's advice that I had nothing to lose, I agreed to the adoption. After all, I was already taking on the duties of a flesh and blood daughter, and with my new status, I was ensured access to her if in failing health she was hospitalized. The adoption was straightforward and unsentimental, the formalities concise, and the judge cordial. As we left the judge's chambers, Alan, by way of celebration, said to Minerva, "Now you have a daughter." As negative as ever, Minerva replied, "But she won't listen to me." She never divulged what it was I wasn't listening to, or for that matter, the reason for the adoption. Admirably active into her 90s, Minerva swam at the Y and continued to drive until she made an unfortunate left turn into oncoming traffic, totaling her car and her confidence. After that, I drove her everywhere she needed to go. One day when I arrived, she excitedly showed me a silky scarf she had painstakingly adorned with long fringe that floated gracefully as she pretended to twirl around the room. The gift of creativity had momentarily awakened in her a long dormant girlish glee. It was a privilege for me to glimpse what had been. Minerva was an unusual combination of generosity and meanness. She replaced my car when it broke down, propped up my finances when my freelance work hit a lull. At the same time, she continued to find fault with me. Only once near the end of her life did she say, "I don't know how I would manage without you." Unaccustomed to praise from her, I gratefully thanked her. "Well," she said, "if I'd known it meant so much to you, I would have told you sooner." She never mentioned it again. Minerva died in her 95th year on Valentine's Day, on the second day of the first vacation I'd taken in years. I flew back from Florida and made arrangements for my adopted mother.
Betty MacDonald has been a featured reader at Spoken Word in Kingston, New York, Read650 at the Cell Theater in New York City, and the Best of Read650 at Vassar College. Last October, she interpreted 6 roles for the Work Project at Catskill's Bridge Street Theater, and for 30 years, she has honed her storytelling abilities as an active cast member with Community Playback Theater in the Hudson Valley. She reads frequently at Words Carry Us, a monthly series she hosts at Green Kill in Kingston, and you can learn more about Betty at bettymoonmacdonald.com. Catherine Hiller has a PhD in English from Brown University, and her most recent novel is The Feud, about a deadly workplace rivalry. Recorded at her home in Westchester County, here she is with All I Ask.
We're in the kayak, my mother and I, and although the water is calm and we're both wearing life jackets, I'm having second thoughts. After all, we're very far from shore, too far to swim back, and my mother is 90 years old. She had a little trouble getting into the kayak. What if it overturns? Could she push her way out and bob back to the top? I've been paddling for many years and haven't capsized a kayak yet, and the bay is smooth. "This is so lovely," she says. "I feel so safe with you." It's the best thing she could have said, and I stop worrying. She says, "Let's go to Shelter Island." "Mom," I say, "that's much too far, and the current's too strong." Instead, we paddle across the bay toward the point. I start to breathe in sync with my strokes. 2 strokes when I breathe in, 4 strokes when I exhale. This feels very good. My breath, my body, and the boat now feel aligned. In back of me, my mother has stopped paddling and is singing a song in French, off key. She has a greater capacity for joy than anyone I know. When we reach the point, I let the kayak drift and rest my fingers in the water, which is warmer than the air. As we return, my mother chants in my ear, "I must go down to the seas again, down to the seas and sky." How does it go? I remember the first verse of the John Masefield poem, Sea Fever, and turn in the kayak so she can hear me. "I must go down to the seas again, down to the seas and sky, and all I need is a tall ship and a star to steer her by." We make a smooth landing on the beach. I disembark, pull the kayak higher, and carefully help my mother out at one point bearing all her weight, which is all of 90 pounds. Once home, I run to her computer and quickly find the Macefield poem. Suddenly, my eyes are wet. Oh, my mother would be so pleased if she could see my tears. But no, that would be cheap. I will not let myself cry when I read her the poem. That's all I ask, not a single tear. I say, here are the words of the poem. I start to read. I get through the first verse okay. Then I start on the second. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying and the flung spray and the blown spume and the seagulls crying. By a wild call and a clear call, my eyes have started to fill. By all I ask, my voice is a croak, and by seagulls, I'm crying right along with them. My mother is thrilled. Oh, I'm so glad I have a daughter who can respond so deeply to poetry. I shake my head and find myself saying, no, this is dishonest. I take a deep shuddering breath and make it almost to the end of the last stanza before breaking down again. And all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and a quiet sleep, and a sweet dream when the long trick's over. Snot is falling down my nose and I'm sobbing. I've suddenly seen that the poem is about life itself. Death is the quiet sleep, and because we must die, life is a trick, both in the nautical meaning of tour of duty and in the regular meaning of cheat. I want my gallant little mother to live forever. That's all I ask. What do you mean dishonest, she said. I shake my head. It's too complicated to explain. For I'm sure that in wanting to please her, I somehow manufactured those forbidden tears. Why did you say dishonest, she insists. I say, why didn't you figure it out? Her face is keen. She's up for the challenge. She wants to kayak to Shelter Island. She asks, will you tell me if I'm right?
Catherine is the author of Just Say Yes, a marijuana memoir, and Skin, Sensual Tales, about which John Updike wrote, Good, Brave, and Joyful Writing. Among Catherine's other publications are several short stories in Penthouse, 5 novels, 2 pieces in the New York Times Sunday Review, and a feature in AARP magazine. Jennifer Rawlings is an award-winning writer, performer, and filmmaker. In 2019, she won both the Karen Cushman Late Bloomer Award and Los Angeles' Sue Alexander Grant for her soon-to-be-published novel, Empty. She's appeared on Comedy Central, CMT, PBS, VH1, A&E, CNN, HLN, and 2 TED Talks. From her home in Los Angeles, she closes Act 1 of our show with Mom in a War Zone. Here's Jennifer Rawlings.
I'm a mom. I have 4 biological children and 2 by marriage, my stepson and my husband. For 20 years, I've been traveling to war zones to entertain the troops as a stand-up comic. I've traveled to over 70 countries and done over 350 shows for the military. I've been performed in countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, Kosovo. There's always 2 questions people ask me when they find out I travel to war zones. The first question is always, aren't you scared traveling to war zones? Yes, I'm scared. I have 0 military training and I hate to fly. The second question people always ask me is, oh, don't you miss your kids when you travel? No, I do not. If I only had 1 kid, I probably wouldn't be so motivated. But quite honestly, with all those kids, I need the break. Now, I do call my kids every single day from a phone bank at whatever base I'm on. But it's difficult for them to call me. Not that I'm complaining. Cell coverage in Iraq and Afghanistan is patchy. I remember one day just outside of Fallujah, Iraq, the military base where we were performing at was under heavy enemy fire. Mortars were dropping in the distance, the power was knocked out, flickering embers lit up the evening sky. A soft breeze carried the smell of eucalyptus mixed with the sharp, acrid smell of bombs exploding. The clatter of 2 Black Hawk helicopters with their rotor blades still churning was several hundred feet away. These helicopters were waiting to fly us to Babylon, Iraq. Black Hawks always fly in pairs. So far on this tour, all the comics and I would be in one Black Hawk, and our luggage would be in the other Black Hawk. But tonight, everything was different. We were going to be flying lights out so the insurgents couldn't see us. The local rebels were shooting anti-aircraft rocket launchers. As soon as we got off stage that night, and the stage was a flatbed truck, we ran to the chopper, ducking our heads because the blades were still going to ensure for a faster takeoff. As I started to climb into the first chopper, the military host pushed me and the 3 remaining comics into the second chopper. And I'm thinking, I'm sure the military is splitting us up to cut their losses or something. As I climb in the helicopter, my heart is racing. My breathing is heavy as I sit down on the nylon seat in the chopper. The pilot and the co-pilot are performing the pre-flight safety check as I buckle and harness myself. I close my eyes in fear. Moments later, I am jolted by a buzz and a vibrate. What's that noise? What's that noise? Oh my God, it's my phone! Hello? My hand is still trembling. Mom, it's Noah! My son Noah says, crying. I can feel the blood leaving my face. I have given my kids strict instructions to only call me in case of an emergency. Who's hurt? Who's dead? What's on fire? My mind is racing. Elijah ate all the Cheez-Its, Noah says, gulping his words. What? I ask in disbelief. Surely my middle child is not calling me in Iraq to complain that his little brother ate all the snack food. Elijah ate all the Cheez-Its you bought. I didn't get any. Noah sobs. Will you go to the store and buy some more? I take a deep breath, and what I want to say is, why can't your dad, who's probably sitting in the den, on the couch, watching golf, go to the store and buy you some more Cheez-Its? I'm 8,000 miles away being shot at. He's 8 feet away watching someone putt for birdie. But like most moms, I bite my tongue. And I say, I love you, Noah. Of course I will go buy you some more Cheez-Its.
In 2014, Jennifer was named one of 21 leaders for the 21st century by Women's E! News, and her touring solo show, I Only Smoke in War Zones, was featured at the Humor for Peace Festival. Jennifer's directorial debut, Forgotten Voices, Women of Bosnia, was screened at film festivals and universities worldwide. Jennifer has written for the New York Times, Change.org, The Wall Street Journal, Reader's Digest, as well as for television and film. Before we head into a brief intermission, I want you to know that all of the pieces that you're hearing today that are collected in our new book are companion pieces to 17 others that are here with stories about motherhood, mothering, grandmothering, motherlessness, lots of takes on the topic from 17 other very, very talented writers whom we couldn't feature on our program today, but just round this out to be a really remarkable collection and a great gift for anyone. Producing these anthologies is another way we serve our mission to promote writers. They're available through our website and at Amazon for $10 each. And in addition to this new edition on mothers, there are 24 other titles to choose from. The sale of these books, filled with some of the finest two-page stories you'll find anywhere, help fund all the work that we do. And at just 2 pages long, they are perfect bedtime reading, and they'll look much nicer on your side table than that messy stack of New Yorkers you keep meaning to read. Please consider purchasing some of these books for yourself or for someone you care about. Another way you can invest in our mission to promote writers is with a contribution. Funds we rely on to cover basic expenses for our all-volunteer-run organization. Because this event is made possible, as they say on PBS, by viewers like you. Your donation is your investment in Read650, and it enables us to present this quality work in this quality way, supporting our mission to promote writers. You are what makes this possible, and we sincerely thank you for your tax-deductible donations at read650.org. We're always working to broaden our submission pool and feature new and diverse voices. You will find upcoming topics on our website. Please follow us on social media, and please share your email address so we can stay in touch. We're going to pause here for a short break and have another treat for you. Eric J. Roth is a classical guitarist, composer, and arranger. He's also one of my Hudson Valley neighbors. Eric earned a bachelor's degree in music performance from the State University of New York in New Paltz, and he specializes in historical instruments and repertoire. You can learn more about Eric and see videos and learn about upcoming performances on his website, ericjrothmusic.com. Now here's Eric, and we'll be back in about 3 minutes with a great second half. Please stay with us.
Hello, my name is Eric Roth, and I want to wish a happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, especially my own, who I hope will be watching this. I'm going to play a piece on the 19th century guitar by Ernest Jand. He was from Victorian England. The piece is called Morceau Lyrique, or Lyric Piece number 2, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Welcome back to Read 650's special On Mothers event. If you're just joining us, I'm Ed McCann, founder of Read 650, a nonprofit literary arts organization with a mission to promote writers. And if you are just joining us, you've arrived at a great time because we are about to share a great second half featuring the writers Sarah Bracey White, Anna Perrett, Sally Koslow, Maria Tirone, Moira Colangelo, Martha Frankel, and Lisa Goldstein. And by the way, this entire show will also be archived on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, where you will also be able to search and view individual performances. Before we resume with Act 2, I want to thank a few people who contributed their time and their talent to bringing forth this good work in this good way. Many, many weeks apart, two members of Read 650's editorial team, Karen Duquesne and then Stephen Lewis, contracted the coronavirus. Thankfully, both of them have recovered, though healing and regaining strength, as they would tell you, can take a long time. I appreciate the efforts of our other editors, David Masello and Lisa Donati-Meyer, our incredible copy editor, Shelley Sandler-Kenny, and to our design director, Diane Focus, who's responsible for the look of our branding and our books and our website. I'm grateful to our advisory board members, Jane Kaup and Sarah Caldwell, for their expertise and generosity in establishing some of Read 650's operating standards. And especially to nonprofits consultant Susan Ragusa. From Susan, I am learning all the time how to prioritize and better steer this fledgling nonprofit organization. Anyone learning to operate a nonprofit or is attempting to build their organization's capacity should know about Susan Ragusa, and here is her website address. Finally, I am so grateful to our donors who support our efforts with contributions that put gas in the tank and wind beneath our wings. Your donation is an investment in our mission that makes you a partner in our efforts to promote writers. Thank you all for all that you do and for all your encouragement. We begin Act 2, finally, with Sarah Bracey White. Sarah is a writer, teacher, storyteller, and frequent contributor to Read 650. She's a graduate of Morgan State University and the University of Maryland, and her published works include Primary Lessons, a memoir, The Wanderlust, a South Carolina folktale, and Feelings Brought to Surface, a poetry collection. Sarah opens Act 2 from her home in Westchester County with My Other Mother. Here is Sarah Bracey White.
My father was blacklisted from teaching because of his efforts to get equal pay for colored teachers in our South Carolina hometown. I was just 9 months old, but my mother needed to return to teaching. Reluctantly, she accepted her oldest sister Susie's offer to care for me in Philadelphia until I could go to school. Aunt Susie was married with a successful home laundry business, but childless once again after the recent death of her 4-year-old adopted daughter. As I grew older, Aunt Susie relished my lively nature, talkativeness, and interest in everything and everyone on Smedley Street. My first memory is of the workroom in the basement of Aunt Susie's row house. I'm about 4 years old, standing at one end of a long wooden table, dressing and undressing paper dolls. She's at the other end, stacking freshly ironed sheets and pillowcases into bundles, securing them with brown paper, and sealing the bundles with craft tape that she moistens across a shiny metal dispenser. She's singing God Bless the Child Who Has His Own. Aunt Susie's skin is smooth and dark brown. She says it got that way from drinking her coffee strong and black, just like she is. She lets me drink coffee, but always puts plenty of milk in mine to keep me from getting dark like her, she says. She laughs when I tell her that I want it black so I can be just like her when I grow up. You sure won't have to do the work I do, she tells me. You're going to college. During the summer, men with big box cameras hooked on long legs often come to Smedley Street to take children's pictures. Aunt Susie says it's because they know the colored and white homeowners on our block have enough money to pay for pictures of their children. Aunt Susie always buys the pictures they take of me. The summer I'm 5.5, my mama sends for me to return home to South Carolina. I don't want to go, I tell Aunt Susie. I don't want you to go either, she says, but your mama wants all her children home with her. You're hers, not mine. Memories of my life with Aunt Susie sustained me long after we parted. From afar, Aunt Susie became my single-parent family's guardian angel. When one of us was sick, she wired money for the doctor and medicine. Sometimes the money orders she tucked in her letters paid the light bill or the rent. If my sisters or I needed something extra for school or after-school programs, all we had to do was write to Aunt Susie. Soon a box or letter would arrive bearing the requested item or money for it. My mother died during my senior year of high school. Days before graduation, I received a letter from Aunt Susie. In it were a train ticket, a $20 bill, and a brochure for a girls' camp in Vermont where she'd gotten her friend to give me a summer job as her kitchen helper. Aunt Susie beamed at my college graduation. "See, you made it, just like I told you," she said, grinning proudly. Years later, when I self-published a book of poetry, Aunt Susie requested 24 copies and sold them to her neighbors and my old friends on Smedley Street. Her check for $196 came along with a note that read, "I'm so proud of you. Can't wait until your next book comes out. One day you'll be famous." "I can't ever be famous," I wrote back. "Stories about famous people always include pictures from their childhood. I don't have any." The next time I visited Aunt Susie, she handed me a box full of photos taken during the 5 years I lived with her. "Now," she said, "you don't have any reason not to be famous."
The New York Times, the Journal News, the Scarsdale Inquirer, and the Afro-American newspapers have published Sarah Bracey White's essays, which have also been included in the anthologies Children of the Dream, Dreaming in Color, Living in Black and White, and Heartscapes, True Stories of Remembered Love. Sarah and her husband live in Ossining, New York, near the Hudson River, which Sarah says is an ongoing source of inspiration. Anna Perrett is English, and she's lived in America for over 25 years. She has 2 almost adult daughters and lives with her husband in Larchmont, New York. Her contribution to this special Mother's Day event is Strangers on a Boat. Here's Anna Perrett.
The double-deck river cruiser lurched in its moorings as if already seasick. I hung onto the coarse rope slung along the gangplank, clutched my baby to my hip, and followed my father to a vacant wooden bench at the stern of the boat. Gripping the wrist of our jet-lagged, hyperactive toddler, my husband joined us to watch the last of the wedding guests arrive and cast long shadows in the dragging midsummer evening. The River Thames slapped at the hull. "There she is," Dad said. At the far end of the long barge, beyond the draping dresses and the high heels, the sparkling jewellery and the black suits, my mother sat with her second husband, Avi. Her sleeved mid-calf dress covered her tightly clasped knees. Pearls strung her throat like a noose. "She looks old," I said. It had been 20 years, 22. Mum had known Avi only a few months when she left England, left me and my siblings, children, all of us, to move abroad with him. My sister had forgiven her, invited her to the wedding. I had neither seen nor spoken to her since she left. Handing the baby to my husband, I seized our buzzing 2-year-old by the hand. I'll find somewhere quieter, calm her down. Below, I sat on a red vinyl banquette under a porthole at the edge of the underlit lounge. An engine kicked. The boat shuddered as if in protest, jerked and settled into a barely perceptible cruise. My daughter, stretched out on the bench, pretended to try to fall asleep. Resting my hand on my child's belly, gently swelling with each breath, I told myself, I will not spoil my sister's wedding. I will not confront Mum. Smile non-committally if needed and ignore her. I will not spoil my sister's wedding. The porthole darkened. The long evening finally accepted the night. Dance music filtered down from the upper deck and competed with the thrum of the engine. Thud, thud. There was no way off this boat. There was no way off this banquette. Mum and Avi, uninvited, dragged 2 chairs to the opposite side of my table and sat down. So, tell me about yourself, Mum said. What have you been up to? What have I been up to for over 20 years? I don't think it was rudeness that prevented me from answering. She tried again. It's very odd seeing your father. He looks older. Mum smiled as if daring me to suggest that she did too. Her face seemed to break with the smile. The fine wrinkles which ran down her cheeks from the corners of her bright blue eyes creviced. He has put on weight, your father, a lot. She patted her own relatively flat stomach. In fact, I'm not sure I would have recognized him if I hadn't seen him here, in context. I had to know. I knew I might be punishing myself, but I had to ask. Would you have recognized me? For a moment, she looked directly at me. Goodness, her eyes were blue. I met her stare. Her gaze deflected and settled on my forehead. I held my breath. Probably not, no. I didn't notice my husband descend the open riser stairs. Shunting the baby to his other side, he slid across the bench and laid a protective arm across my shoulder, his warm thigh pressing against mine. Are you okay? Mum and Avi rose from the table and walked towards the stairs. Avi paused, turned to me, and said, You would like your mother. I shook my head. You don't know me. You can't possibly have any idea what or whom I like. Mum and Avi returned to the dancing. Don't worry, I said to my husband. I'll forgive Mum by the time my sister has her second wedding.
Anna Perret's work has appeared in a number of publications, including Ghost Town Literary Magazine, Inscape, and Orbis, and she has read several original stories at Read650 themed events. She is currently revising her novel and says she expects to be doing so for a while. Up next, we have Sally Koslow, the former editor-in-chief of McCall's Magazine and the author of 6 books translated into 14 languages. Sally's latest work is Another Side of Paradise, a biographical novel about F. Scott Fitzgerald's Hollywood love affair with Sheila Graham, a movie industry reporter who exposed the secrets of others while hiding secrets of her own. Though she lives in New York City, Sally may be the only person you'll ever meet from Fargo, North Dakota. Here she is with Add 1 teaspoon of Mother Love.
In my childhood, women baked in self-defense. If Fargo, North Dakota had any bakeries, they must have been hidden in underground silos. If you wanted a decent dessert, you drove 220 miles north to Winnipeg, 235 miles southeast to Minneapolis, or greased a pan and preheated the oven to 350 degrees. Sensible women chose the latter. Until my mother detoured into Buntland, her default recipe featured instant pudding, vodka, and Galliano. She prepared pies, prune bread, which sounds vile, but it's quite heavenly, a parade of cookies, bars, and a blizzard of cakes, airy angel food, heart-shaped layers for Valentine's Day, and sheet cakes crowned with broiled coconut or her mother's 7-minute frosting. When I went off to college, Mom shipped me butterscotch oatmeal cookies and coffee cans. I suspect my boyfriend, now husband, stuck around mostly because he had a crush on the cookies. My mother never considered her baking special, so neither did I. I spent my adolescence longing for a mom who could butter my ego while sharing wisdom to help me become enviably chic and irresistible to boys. I wanted Coco Chanel meets Jackie O. What I got was a life member of Hadassah in anklets and orthopedic wedgies whose hair flat-lined at pin curls and who, at the first rumble of stress, crashed with a 4-day migraine. I yearned for a storybook relationship past the time I, too, became a mom. Then abruptly the fantasy imploded. On one of her visits to New York, I took my mother to a concert at the Metropolitan Museum, which she insisted was the University of Minnesota, where she'd gone to college. I didn't need a diagnosis of dementia, that came the following year, to guess what was happening, even though my mother was barely 60. For the next few weeks, I couldn't staunch my tears for her tragedy and, to be honest, for mine. The bond I dreamt of, measured by the high standards of my imagination, was never going to happen. Soon my mother forgot who I was. When my husband and I visited the nursing home where she now lived, we tried to penetrate the maximum security prison that is dementia. "Do you remember the recipe for those cookies you sent Sally at college?" he asked one afternoon. Recognition twinkled. "I forgot that recipe a long time ago," my mom joked. It was the last coherent sentence I ever heard her utter. 2 years after her death, I had a dream. She was preparing Thanksgiving dinner and she baked pumpkin pie, for which she gave me pointers. Plain whipped cream has no flavor. Always add vanilla and confectioner's sugar. As she showed me the amounts, her voice was strong and her demeanor alive. I woke with a smile. The dream was both hello and goodbye. When a friend has a dinner party, I'm the one who always volunteers to bring dessert. As I bake, often from recipes in my mom's handwriting, I hear her Marge accent that I left in Fargo. "Refrigerate the dough. Don't make a crust if the kitchen's muggy. Take the eggs out early to get to room temperature. Measure accurately. Baking depends on chemical reactions." I'm back in our childhood kitchen. Outside, sun bounces off snowdrifts, but inside it's warmed by my mother's love.
Sally contributes essays to magazines, newspapers, anthologies, and websites, including the New York Times, Oxford University Press, Real Simple, O, the Oprah Magazine, More, and many others. She has spoken at the F. Scott Fitzgerald Society in France, colleges, libraries, women's clubs, synagogues, and Generation Women, a female storytelling night in New York City. And she's taught creative writing privately and at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College. Maria Tyrone's debut collection of nonfiction, At Home in the New World, was published in 2018 by Bordighera Press. Its opening piece was named a notable essay in Best American Essays 2019. Her nonfiction has appeared in such publications as Witness, Green Mountains Preview, The Common, and Litro in the UK. From her home in Jackson Heights, Queens, here's Maria with The Body Breaking Away.
I don't like to see what 95 years have visited upon the body that birthed me, or feel the papery forearm that used to push a walker. But I see and feel and know. This is the same woman, now reduced to 57 inches, who used to hike a mile to a promising flea market, her swift stride communicating happy purpose. "Her bones are so fragile, they're almost invisible on the X-ray," one doctor said. Hearing that, it shouldn't have surprised me that a fracture was diagnosed again a year after my mother fell at home, breaking her femur. "This is a tough one," the famous orthopedic surgeon said, viewing the latest X-ray. And with those words, my hopeful heart capsized. The bone never healed properly, he explained, and a 4-hour surgery to fix the problem would be very risky. The safe alternative? Live housebound with a permanently fractured hip. Legally blind in one eye for most of her life, and now hard of hearing, my mother spends her days at a table. From there, she observes wind in trees. She rarely complains, but is surely in pain despite medication, wincing when she shifts her body in the chair. Lately, I've been thinking about bones, how the diminishing flesh of the elderly makes them nobodies, near phantoms not seen but looked through, practicing to be just bone. The cliché is true. I've become my mother's mother, shopping for her, cooking, paying bills, dealing with doctors, pharmacy, insurance company, hiring and scheduling her aides, updating the many women I meet in our neighborhood who say, "How's Connie doing? I miss her." I dimly remember being fed almost raw eggs from a pink Melmac cup and the taste of the liquid vitamin my mother spooned into my mouth. Now in my own kitchen, I prepare chicken a la king, breaded cutlets, and tuna patties to stock her freezer. I recall how she overbundled me as a child. Now, when she feels the cold through to her bones, I help her into the sweater I bought in size extra small. Although the rebellious American-born baby of her family, my mother couldn't avoid Cicely's influence on her genetic code. And so she was fatalistic, wary of strangers, and always a worrier. Nothing has changed there. Her frequent expressions of concern are clear. "I'm your mother," she declares by way of explanation. Mother with furrowed brow, a universal archetype in her worldview. What's changed is my worrying about her when I never did before. Her firm opinions and quickness demonstrated self-confidence and independence. Now I worry about her psychological state. How hard it must be for her to sit indoors in a wheelchair, giving up her daily walks to buy lotto tickets and supermarket hopping for the weekly specials, knowing she'll never again socialize with her flea market friends, the gay antique dealers, the church ladies, the vendors who all knew her by name. To have only the memory of sifting through jewelry like an archaeologist searching for buried treasure who comes up literally with gold. And I worry about her physical state. What's her blood pressure? Is she losing weight despite her daily dose of Ensure? I can't know because it's too dangerous for her to stand, broken hips, on a home scale. Her body is inevitably breaking down. Caring for my mother is facing myself several decades from now. That is, if I've inherited her gene for longevity. In an old photo, my mother's dress clings to her curves. "You've got some body," uncouth men probably called out. A city girl through and through, she was never a homebody. As a teen in the era of miniskirts, I'd hear her rebuke, "You're showing too much skin." Now my mother must forego modesty as aides towel her back after a sponge bath, her wing bones prominent as if pushing through her body and away.
Maria is also a poet and the author of the collections Eye to Eye, A Secret Room in Fall, for which she won the Robert McGovern Collection Prize, The Bodies We Were Loaned, and a chapbook, American Gothic Take Two. Magazines, including Poetry Magazine and Plowshares, and more than 25 anthologies have featured her Pushcart Prize-nominated work. In 2015, she became the poetry editor of the journal Italian Americana. Moira Colangelo is a retired healthcare executive, and she is an avid hiker, cook, and reader. She and her husband live in Stamford, Connecticut, and Moira's contribution to our show recalls the summer she and her sister helped pack up and empty their mother's home. Here's Moira Colangelo with Moving On.
My sister Sharon and I had the dubious privilege of spending a week that summer of 2005 helping pack or dispose of 40-plus years of my elderly parents' belongings. For the third day in a row, we carry, roll, and drag boxes, old furniture, and garbage bags from the house to the car in scorching August heat. This stuff is for Goodwill, and this is for the dump, my mother orders, pointing for the umpteenth time to the piles she deliberately sorted. She begins poking through open boxes I had neatly packed, ready to be closed and labeled. My irritation evident, I plead, please, please, Mom, those are done. We really need to work on the kitchen stuff. Ach, I know, my mother snaps. Throwing up her hand, she turns her back to me and continues to rifle through the carefully organized items. I whisper to Sharon, "What the hell?" My sister shrugs and bolts out the back door, cigarette lit before the door slams shut. My mother faces me, and in her signature staccato indicating annoyance, commands, "The attic. You must get it done today." I wonder, had Mom figured out that Sharon and I never actually went to Goodwill? That we decided it was just easier to take everything to the dump? Was the attic my ultimate punishment? I stomp away. In an upstairs bedroom closet, I yank open the narrow, pull-down steps leading to the rafters of the house. Stifling heat envelops me. Cobwebs and dust swirl in slow motion above the cartons strewn about in the cramped space. Trip after trip, I haul the attic contents down 2 flights of stairs, plopping each filthy box on the floor in the kitchen where my mother is haphazardly emptying cabinets and quite effectively ignoring me. I stumble on the bottom attic step, spilling the contents of a box across the bedroom floor. In the mess is a large old-fashioned cookie tin. I open it and sift through the contents. Odd buttons, a rusty brooch, and a wad of yellow documents. As I examine the papers, it dawns on me that I am holding pieces of my mother's life. There are her travel documents from Belfast to America in 1956, arriving with 2 young daughters after reuniting with her husband after 2.5 years apart. There are sad telegrams from Ireland. Her mother died, then her brother died. There are old-fashioned savings passbooks, evidence of her endless struggles to save money. Always, as she'd say, robbing Peter to pay Paul. A crumpled letter dated January 1971 from a desperately poor single mother in our neighborhood. The woman thanks my mom for the toys and food she sent for the holidays. I can't help but chuckle. Leave it to my mom to make sure a couple of Jewish kids have a Merry Christmas. There is an old payment booklet with neatly notated stubs in my mother's handwriting. All payments to the Singer Sewing Center. $10 a month for 10 months, beginning in December 1973. Oh, God, I whisper. That was the Christmas I begged incessantly for a Jeannie Singer sewing machine. A lot of the popular girls made their own clothes back then, even the captain of the cheerleading team. From the time I was in 6th grade, I dreamed of being popular, and at 15 still stood on the outer rings of that exalted clique. I had believed that sewing machine was the answer to all my sophomore prayers. Back in the kitchen, I put the kettle on for tea. Mom is asleep in a stuffed chair in the corner. I kneel down at her side and gently shake her awake. Attic's empty, I say. What do you need me to do next?
Moira Colangelo discovered the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College 2 years ago and found flash fiction a great way to share short stories about her large Irish family, as well as other life experiences from her travels. Up next, we present Martha Frankel. Martha is a writer, knitter, and research fanatic. She's the founder and executive director of Woodstock Book Fest, an annual celebration of writers and readers now in its 11th year. Here's Martha from her home with Remember.
In every photo taken of me before I'm 15, someone is holding my arms behind my back, as if I might float off if they weren't tethering me to the earth. Usually it was my mother, but in a few it was my sister Helene, and in one my father. We're looking at the photos now because my mother is going blind, and we want her to tell us who and what we don't recognize before it's too late. Everyone was always holding me back, I say. That's not true, my mother says. She gives each word the same emphasis. That's not true. My mother is staring into space, wearing dark sunglasses and smoking a Kent. Her gray hair stands out in little wisps. Her bottom lip is trembling. She looks like a pale Xerox of herself. Sylvia, yet not quite Sylvia. The photos are spread on my sister's dining table. Helene sighs. In my family, I'm known as the drama queen. But when she starts to look through them, she laughs. Wow, I never noticed before. Let me see, my mother demands. She holds the photo close, but it's clear she can't make out details. I take the photo back. This one is at the bungalow colony. You've got me in some kind of wrestling lock. What's everyone wearing, my mother asks. Helene grabs the photo. I'm wearing madras shorts and a cardigan, she says. I'm maybe 13. Martha's wearing those pedal pushers we couldn't get off her, and you have on... Oh, my mother says dismissively. Grandma took that photo. I have a babushka on my head, right? We were headed over to Monticello, to the racetrack. I can't imagine why I would have been holding Martha's arms. I exchange a look with Helene. That was over 50 years ago. My mother remembers where we were going. She's an elephant that way. We look at another. This was taken in front of Patricia Murphy's, Helene says. You and I are holding Martha's wrists. We're all quiet, remembering flaky popovers and salty rare roast lamb. Patricia Murphy's was a warehouse-sized restaurant we went to celebrate something special. My mother's answer is a little click in the back of her throat. I hold up another. In this one, it's clear our father was very sick. The cancer was ravaging his body. My sister and I gasp. What? My mother asks, because she may be blind, but her antennae are 20/20. Daddy's sick, I say, suddenly listless. Where were we? My mother asks. I turn away. I don't like this game anymore. Miami, Helene whispers. The Sans Souci Hotel. I was 15. I made out with a boy named Alan every day, at the pool, at the dances, in the staircase, wherever. My lips were chapped for weeks afterwards. I could recall the pattern of each garish shirt he wore, every single word he spoke to me between those kisses. My father's sickness hadn't even registered. What kind of person am I? My mother starts to laugh then, a contagious happy laugh that pulls Helene and me in despite ourselves. That laugh grows in us. Remember how much fun Daddy was, my mother asks. Remember he went to one of your dances and he did the twist and the pony, and he was such a good dancer you weren't sure whether to be proud or embarrassed? Remember he taught you to drive when you were 10? Or how he would listen with all his attention, as if what you said was the most important thing in the world? Remember? For the first time in years, I see my father not through the sorrow of his death, but through the shine of my mother's love. Remember? She says again. That word, remember, makes us forget what it was we wanted to know. I put the photos back in the box and close the lid.
Martha says that whatever she's doing, she would prefer to be doing it in her pajamas. and that each and every day, being a writer feels like a dream come true. On any given day, Martha would rather be sitting on a porch, drinking coffee, and talking to her mother. We close Act 2 with writer Lisa Goldstein. Lisa is a Wall Street executive and a recognized expert in healthcare finance. Her personal essays have been published annually in Visible Ink anthology since 2015, 3 of which were selected for staging at the Visible Ink performance in New York City. Lisa's essay, Goal, Telling My 10-Year-Old About My Diagnosis, was published on breastcancer.org, and Women You Should Know published her essay, To Die or Not to Die. It's DYE. Lisa lives in Manhattan with her husband and 2 teenagers, and she closes our show with Fearless Girl Meets Fearless Girl. Here's Lisa Goldstein.
I was running behind when I came out of the subway, racing home to scoop up my daughter and travel across town to a doctor's appointment. But a construction worker had commandeered the sidewalk with his survey equipment, forcing me to slow down and walk around him. Annoyed, I rhetorically asked him what he was doing. I got an impromptu engineering lesson back. He pointed to another crew member across the street holding a prism. The prism creates an unbroken line from the sidewalk to the new building. That's how we know it will be perfectly straight. Perfectly straight, that caught me off guard. I hoped it was a good sign. That afternoon, Julie and I were going to see an orthopedist about the curve in her spine. Julie's scoliosis resonated hard with me. When I was her age, I wore a hot, thick, plastic brace for 2 long years, all day, every day, to straighten out the curve of my curve. It was awful. It wouldn't be until well after those 2 years that I realized it wasn't that bad. But of all the curveballs life could throw my daughter, why did curvature of the spine have to be one of them? I told my nervous 13-year-old that she could handle this. I called her my fearless girl, like the statue in Lower Manhattan. Fearless girl stood defiantly, staring down Charging Bull. She could take on anything. Today, I needed to be fearless. I needed to walk into that appointment defiant, chest out, back kind of straight, hands placed squarely on my uneven hips, ready to take on scoliosis again, this time for my daughter. But when we arrived, I melted. I was fearful. The waiting room was crowded. There were kids in wheelchairs, others with permanent braces on their legs. A nurse escorted us to the exam room and measured her height with a stadiometer, informing us that it took months for the engineers to install it. We had to make sure the floor was 100% level, so the scale would be perfectly straight. There were those words again. The doctor walked in, examined Julie's back, and gave us her expert thoughts. The curve is subtle. There's no likely need to do anything. Let's take an x-ray to make sure. We floated down the hall to imaging and then back again, my now weightless daughter gliding on my unencumbered back. A few minutes later, the doctor walked back in, swiveled the computer screen so we could see, and clicked. Click. The shadowy x-ray appeared instantly, and one thing was clear. That curve was not subtle. It looked like someone yanked a thick chain, hard. Oh, the doctor's voice dropped a few decibels, not what I thought. The room grew quiet. Then a tsunami hit. The doctor wanted to brace her right away. Could we come back tomorrow for measurements and a fitting? I looked at my daughter, her blue eyes now rimmed in watery red. I found my fearless voice and informed the doctor that Julie was leaving for camp in a few days. Unless 2 months would make a difference, we would revisit this later when she got home from camp. We walked out in silence. It was my daughter who spoke up first. There were so many disabled kids in that waiting room, Mom, she whispered. Maybe a brace won't be so bad. She had gained a lifetime of perspective in one afternoon. My fearless girl was indeed my fearless girl. Whatever she faced, she could handle. You can do this, I assured her, wrapping my arms around her. We'll deal with this later, when you get home from camp. A small smile came across her face. My daughter's spine may have been curved, but I knew her head was on straight, perfectly straight.
In 2015, Lisa was selected to read her humorous essay, Summer of George, at the Northern New Jersey edition production of Listen to Your Mother. She writes in between analyzing income statements and helicopter parenting. As we wind down this first ever all-online edition of Read650, I want to thank you for the encouragement and the good wishes you've shared during these past several weeks. I'm excited about serving our mission to promote writers and to do that in these new ways. And I encourage you to visit the website and join the mailing list or follow us on social media to stay connected. Share your thoughts, your suggestions. What would you like to see? What's next for Read650? Well, we have been invited to participate in this year's Bryant Park Summer Reading Series, and we have tentative plans with other venues in New York City and Westchester County. But while we can't predict or confirm anything right now, our advisory board is looking at other ways to serve and to fund our mission. Maybe with another themed show like this, and perhaps with shorter, more frequent live-streamed events. Share your thoughts. Join our mailing list, follow us on social media to stay in touch, and please tell your writer and your reader friends about us. Challenges can create opportunities, and as we wait for the day we can all gather again at a Read650 public event, please know that we remain strongly committed to fulfilling our mission to promote established and emerging writers through curated live and digital performances celebrating the spoken word. We're exploring and developing new ways to do that every day, and you can be a part of it. There's lots of quiet heroism going on all around us right now, from the medical personnel on the front lines to the people working daily to provide other essential services. This is a time when everything seems to matter more, when resources are stretched, and when we might even question the necessity or the value of art in our lives. But as the artist Louis Netter recently wrote, we are moving inward, to the vast inner space of our thoughts and imagination, a place we have perhaps neglected. Of all the necessities we now feel so keenly aware of, the arts and their contribution to our well-being is evident and in some ways central to coronavirus confinement for those of us locked in at home. For some, there are more pressing needs, but momentary joys, even in dire circumstances, often come through the arts and through collective expression. Everything we do right now, every act of kindness and sharing matters more than ever. Please know that your book purchase, your donation, your investment in Read650's mission to promote writers matters, and it makes a real difference. I'm very grateful for your support and for all that you do. I want to close the show with a favorite Billy Collins poem of mine, which ties in perfectly with our show's theme. It's The Lanyard. The other day, I was ricocheting slowly off the blue walls of this room, moving as if underwater from typewriter to piano, from bookshelf to an envelope lying on the floor, when I found myself in the L section of the dictionary, where my eyes fell upon the word lanyard. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one into the past more suddenly, a past where I sat at a workbench at a camp by a deep Adirondack lake, learning how to braid long, thin plastic strips into a lanyard, a gift from my mother. I'd never seen anyone use a lanyard, or wear one, if that's what you did with them, but that did not keep me from crossing strand over strand, again and again, until I had made a boxy red and white lanyard for my mother. She gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted spoons of medicine to my lips, laid cold face cloths on my forehead, then led me out into the airy light, and taught me to walk and swim, and I in turn presented her with a lanyard. Here are thousands of meals, she said, and here is clothing and a good education. And here is your lanyard, I replied, which I made with a little help from a counselor. Here's a breathing body and a beating heart, strong legs, bones and teeth, and 2 clear eyes to read the world, she whispered. And I said, here is the lanyard I made at camp. And here I wish to say to her now is a smaller gift. Not the worn truth that you can never repay your mother, but the rueful admission that when she took the two-tone lanyard from my hand, I was as sure as a boy could be that this useless, worthless thing I wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even. That was the lanyard from The Trouble with Poetry and Other Poems by Billy Collins. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your support, and please stay safe. I'm Ed McCann, and this is Read 650.